What's up, everybody? How's it going? Today in this video we are going to be talking through a little bit of routing and stuff through Next.js, talking about dynamic catch-all routes and stuff like that, figuring out how to use that to query any type of page that you create in WordPress, whether it's a top-level page or a sub-page, making sure that that routing works dynamically everywhere. So we go through a little bit of that, and then towards the end of the video, we'll talk through a little bit of how to actually fetch data from WordPress using SWR, server side grabbing data and making sure that it stays up to date, never gets stale, all of that type of stuff. So we'll go through that in the video, and thanks for watching. So Next gives us the ability to do what's called catch-all routes. So we can essentially use what looks like a spread operator here in our file name, in addition to our dynamic route file. We use the three dots. This will match any like sub page that may exist within our site. And the problem that we were running into is the fact that the query that we were trying to run, rather, let me take a step back. The router, the Next.js router, returns us an array of each part of the URI for the query. So this const here that we had set up, this destructured variable that we had set up, was returning us an array, which we cannot pass over to our API endpoint to actually query a single page. What we need to do is essentially extract out the last part of the URI and use that as our query parameter. So what we started trying to do here, and if I go to our application, I just wanted to, on a page, and actually this confused me because we did not rename this to page. What I wanted to do is, if we go over here and let's go to the Twitch test page. Is that a page that we actually created? Twitch test, yeah. It is going to throw an error for me, and why? Dude, we're starting off strong, aren't we? The WordPress instance is indeed still running. We have our slug here, and we're not returning any data. That's right. Which is fine. I just want this to return here, and then everything else can be unreachable for a minute. That's fine. Nothing was returned from the render. Okay, that's fine. We get it. I don't need any of this data right now. I just want to console log out the router. So this is what we're looking for. Console logging out the router gives us a ton of our information that we are looking for. So we were destructuring this query object within our router function, or what is returned from our router function. I want to look in here. Let's kind of dig into this a little bit, because I want to see if we go to Twitch test /DOMS page. What I want to look for is kind of something that we can use. Component slug as path query slug is just an array. So part of our issue was that when we tried to define the we essentially tried to run a little bit of logic that would grab the last item in this array, and that for whatever reason wasn't working, because this Yeah, actually, I don't know why that wasn't working. In any case, let's try a couple of things here. We have this as path variable. So if we do router dot as path and just output that, that gives us the second half of the URL that contains most of our URI. So if we go into the GraphQL, the graphical IDE, I'm curious if we can leverage, because we're querying the URI. So I'm curious if we can leverage something like this without all of the extra quotation marks to get back the page. And it looks like we can. So instead of destructuring the URI from this query, maybe we can just destructure the as path value out of here and use, so that comes across with the leading slash, which is kind of weird. It does make sense, but let's see what this does for us. And then if we just console log the data here, just so that we can see if we are getting anything. Refresh. We are getting undefined, which kind of makes sense because the API is going to end up being slash API slash page slash that. So slash API slash page slash Twitch test DOMs page. I wonder if part of the problem here too is that our API is also not a catch-all route. So if we adjust our API to be more of a catch-all route, undefined internal server error, gotcha, that's all right. Nope. I just want to query the top level and see what's happening here. So we're getting a 500 error. Let's look at the response and see if we can glean a little bit more information than just 500 error. Internal server error. Maybe we don't want this to be a catch-all route, because my logic here is we should be able to query a single page, right? Like when we query these pages, we don't actually care initially, and we can get all of this information that we need from the actual page itself, the data on the page. But if I wanted to query DOMs test or whatever, is it DOMs test or DOMs page? So when I query DOMs page, nothing comes back. This is still the slug. If we just pass DOMs page into here, nothing's going to come back. If I do Twitch test slash DOMs page, are you going to come back with something? You are. Okay. So what do we have to do here in order to build out these two things? I guess what we can try to do, but I think this is what was not working for us before, we seemingly have to format this. So console.log as path. And let's go back to the actual front end here. Twitch test DOMs page, console. So it's initially coming back as just the name of the file here. So I'm wondering if we have to leverage like get server-side props or something like that here to first set the slug and then pass that down to our SWR hook to actually make the query to make that query. Because this data isn't defined initially. So let's give that a try. Instead of using useRouter in here, let's go ahead and dive into, I think we're gonna want server-side props here. Let's take a look. Data fetching. So let's think through this a little bit. Do we use get static props here, or are we going to use get server side props? So we can get with get static props, the context parameter is an object containing params, which are the route parameters for pages using dynamic routes. Then params will look like ID. You should use this together with get static paths, which we'll explain later. Okay. Let's take a look at get static paths real quick. Get static paths. So if a page has dynamic routes and uses get static props, it needs to define a list of paths that have to be rendered to HTML at build time. So part of the problem that we're going to have here is part of the draw that we have, right, with using WordPress and Next is the ability for users like admins, editors, whoever, to create pages and have them just show up, which means that this is going to have to be server-side generated. Otherwise, these pages won't get built until the site is actually built. So when we push this up to a production environment, as soon as you push it up, it builds the page, it makes a query to WordPress and says, hey, get all of the pages and generate them statically at build time, and that's it. If you want your site to be super dynamic, if editors are creating a lot of posts and stuff like that, they need to be able to have these dynamically generated. And if we look at like the Next.js examples, let's see how they're handling posts, for example. WordPress. So we go into pages, we go into posts. Let's take a look at their dynamic routing and stuff here and see how they handle this. So they have a get static props function. Part of it is for preview, which we don't have to worry about too much. They are grabbing the slug and then making a query based on that slug. It then returns the post and posts data for that. And then they are using get static paths. They make a query to get all posts. So I wonder how dynamic this is, because when you go to create, I'm just trying to think through this a little bit in my head. When this query is made, it is made at build time to get the static paths of all of the posts that are currently created. This get static paths function is not run on like every page load or on every request. So I really do think that we need to use get server-side props in order to handle this, because on the load of any page, we need to query the most up-to-date data on the server. And if that information is generated at build time, if a user goes in after the site has been built to create a new page or post, those things will not show up in an actual production environment. One of the things that's a little bit tough working with Next is the fact that when you're building locally, when you save a file, it's rebuilding the site. It's recompiling everything, which makes it feel like your statically generated pages are getting updated. So, for example, although it's tough because I'm not 100% sure if I'm not 100% confident in that, because we are making a request to an API that is dynamically updated. So the data is what's changing. It's not the actual like paths or anything on the front end of the site. Interesting. How do we want to handle this? Let's try with get static props first and see where that gets us, because we're essentially just fetching data from an API, and we have a dynamic route here. Yeah, let's give this a try. I will trust their example to work, obviously, right? What's up, Crifty? Yeah, I'm quite happy it's Friday, man. I said this at the very beginning of the stream, but I feel like not a lot has happened this week, but it still feels like it's been a long week. It's just been a long year for everybody, I'm pretty sure. So let's write out this get static props function. So it's an async function that just sits at the bottom of any Next.js page here. So we've got our catch-all dynamic routing file, and we'll set some static props here. So function get static props. And we don't need to use the preview stuff that they're using in here, so we'll just destructure out the params. And then in here, we should be able we don't need to set the data as a prop here. All that we want to return is the slug. So let's just do that. Return props, and we'll just call this slug. Params.slug. So all that we want to do is once this page is actually rendered, pass down the real slug of the page to our component, and out of here we should be able to just get slug. Let's see what that gives us. Let's maybe do this on a top level page first. Static paths is required for dynamics or SSG pages and is missing for slug. Oh, I guess let's finish writing out what they have in the example, huh? End of the week, man. It is the end of the week. Export, async, get static paths. So this get static paths function specifies dynamic routes to pre-render based on data. So we essentially need to send a query out to the WordPress API and say, hey, give me all of the pages, and pre-render the data based on what is returned from this function. So if we look back here, there is a query to get all posts, not just posts by slug. So that is something that we will need to write an API endpoint for. Or we can just use a pretty basic fetch. We'll decide on that here in a second. We want to get all posts, and we can await that and do, I think we can just do a basic fetch here. Let's try this and see what we get. If we go back to our API endpoint, we will do essentially the same thing here. Let's just grab this fetch set of parameters for that fetch call and modify it here a little bit. So instead of querying a single post, which is this query that we defined up here, we are going to want to query all posts. And we may want to reorganize this a bit here in a moment, but let's just see what we can do about getting this working first, and then we will go from there. Query all posts. We will name this query all posts query. Yeah, we'll just call it all posts. I don't believe we need to pass it any IDs or parameters or anything like that. All that we're going to need to do is query the pages, and then I believe it comes back as edges, node, title, and actually let's just get the slug. Let's make sure that I wrote that GraphQL query correctly. So if we query pages, edges, node, let's look for the slug. Or the URI. I think actually all that we need is the slug. So we will have this return just the slug so that we can use it here. Do I have an extra? What are you yelling at me about? Comma selected or expected variables ID. We don't need to pass it any variables. We've got the body. There we go. So we have, let me remove that extra space. We have an all posts function here that fetches every slug, and this is pages, not posts. Pages. Okay, come on now. All pages, not uppercased. So we get all the pages, and then we need to return sure I put semicolons where I need to put semicolons. That is not, because that's an array. Okay, yeah, we're good. So we've got an all pages variable that we now need to return. So we return paths, and we get all pages, edges, and then we map over the array that is returned. It should give us the node. Let's take a look at the GraphQL IDE. So we're essentially just destructuring this a little bit here. So we're mapping over this edges array that gets returned, and then we are pulling out the node object from that array. And then we are using that as our starting point, or the parameter that we're passing down to our function, where we then get I don't think we need anything here other than the slug. So we're essentially just telling this to return a string that is our node.slug. And it should use that or an empty array. And we set fallback true so that if they hit a page that doesn't exist, it 404s instead of like completely choking. Hopefully this returns the paths that we need. Let's give this a save. It's just returning the slug. We don't need it to return anything else. Cannot read property map of undefined, naturally. Okay, cannot read property map of undefined. So all pages dot edges dot map node.slug. That chain looks like it should work. Pages. Let's remove that. Query all pages. Pages edges node slug is what we want returned, even though this says URI. I was just checking. We want slug. And that should return the slug. Query all pages. Pages, edges, node, slug. Why are you not able to find that? This is not in our API. This is just in a page. Cannot read property map of undefined. Okay, let's take a look at the request and see if we can get anything a little bit more than that. This is just telling us cannot. Okay, so that's not going to be helpful. So the return, spelling edges right. I've got all pages correct. Query all pages application.json. Let's take a look at their example, just make sure I didn't miss anything stupid. So we've got export async function get static paths. We await the response of our fetch call, and then we return paths all pages dot edges dot map. Okay, let's console.log all pages and see if in the console we get anything helpful. So we get this response. Distributed error, blah, 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 body. So this response is not helpful at all. Preview headers. Don't think we're getting any helpful information through here either. Cannot read property map of undefined. Okay, that's okay. Console log all pages. If we do edges, this is just going to come back as undefined because that's what it's saying it can't map over, right? Scroll all the way back down, undefined. So there's something wrong with our fetch here. We've got the headers. We're stringifying our query and doing all of that properly. We're not passing any variables because we don't need to. Pages, edges, node, slug. I wonder if we need to chain some promises. So let's do then response console.log response. Just see if we get anything out of that. Okay, so we still do get a response. It's just back to that size 0, timeout 0, as if it's expecting more parameters. Let's look at our API again. Method post, we've got that in there. Stop scrolling all around. What are you doing? Just keep in the same spot, please. Oh my God, this is so obnoxious. I have to scroll all the way down every single time I switch between files. We have our headers, we have our body. We do not need any variables, and that's it. Let's see if we need to do something like this. Await data.json. Let's go down here. Const data equals await all pages.json. And then console.log the data here. Scroll all the way down. Give her a refresh. Cannot read property JSON of undefined. Okay, so there's something wrong with this query here. Let's take a look. Get all posts with slug. Let's just take a look at their query and see. Hello, there you are. Get all posts with slug. Posts first 10,000. That's actually a good parameter to keep on here just in case the, well, actually we need all of the pages. It doesn't really matter right now. Await, fetch API, and then it returns data.posts. And this actually may be why. Please. Can't read property JSON of undefined. Let's try all pages. Cannot read. So all pages is just coming back as undefined. Why are we struggling with this so much, man? I don't understand. Scroll all the way down, make sure. So our response is just coming back. Can I prettify this, please? Cannot read property edges of undefined. This should just be a very basic query. Let's go ahead and remove that. We're just awaiting a fetch. That's all that we're doing. Done this a million times. Object, null, headers, symbol map, blah, blah, blah. We're still just getting size and timeout as our response. We ran through this before, man. We've got an async function. We await the fetch, and then we turn it into JSON. I removed the variables. Response.json equals json.data. Const JSON equals await data.json. We do the same thing here. Const JSON equals await all pages dot JSON. And then we return JSON.data. Okay. So now we have that? Is that not what I just did in a different way? Oh, Lord. Okay. Oh, yikes. Great. So now we've got JSON.data.pages. .edges.map. There we go. We'll see if we can clean that up a little bit. I need to go let my pup outside real fast. Give me just a moment. One second. Oh my God, that frustrated me so much. I don't understand. I did this exact same thing, just in a different way. But whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all fine. So now, the provided path DOM's page does not match the page. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Maybe we do want to return the URI. And then maybe we also don't want to set a homepage. Oh boy, okay. So what did we learn here just now? The way that this get static paths function works is it essentially takes in a bunch of URLs. And sets those in the Next.js magical land as paths that can be pre-rendered, pre-fetched, and all of that type of stuff. Hey, thanks so much for the follow, Linux. I appreciate it. So it takes in all of these strings, essentially, that are URL paths. And then statically generates the URI structure that we pass to it. So this is saying post 1, we are just passing it the URI, so any page that comes across as, slash page slash subpage or anything like that, it generates that at build time using the page component, which they're using post as an example. We just have our template file at the root for all of our pages. Note that the value for each params must match. Yeah, ours looks a little different than this because we're mapping and we're not setting any params here, are we? I didn't miss anything in here, did I? Node dot select, no. Interesting. Okay. Page name is pages post, blah, blah, blah. Then param should contain post ID and comment ID. Yep. If the page name uses catch all routes, for example, page, yep, here we go. Then params should contain slug, which is an array. For example, this array is foo bar, then next will statically generate the page at foo/bar. Okay. That's a little bit confusing to me because we need to, let's see what kind of data we can get out of GraphQL. I'm wondering if we need to take the URI. Let's just return the URI here. I'm wondering if we need to take the URI and split this out into an array. We essentially, I think that's what we're going to need to do. So if we destructure this response a little bit, because doing json.data.pages is exceptionally annoying, we should be able to, out of this, get data and then pages. And then from there, hopefully we can just do pages.edges.map. Let's save that and make sure I didn't just destroy anything. Okay, excellent. Do I have another console log somewhere here? I do. Let's remove that. Okay, good. So we've got our pages in here. Now, let's go ahead and console.log. How are we going to do this? Let's think through this for a second. Our pages, and actually, we can even take this one step further and destructure. Destructure edges. I think. Are you upset about that for some reason? Oh, there's just one too many brackets. Okay. let's console log out our edges here, just so that we can see what we're working with. Refresh the page. So we've got an array of objects that are set up to contain a node that is an object that contains our URI. If we take this, we essentially have to build out based on what this is saying, we have to build out arrays that contain the slug, but with each individual part of the URI as a different piece of the array. So if we do something like this, let's create a new function called paths, where we essentially do this work, where we do edges.map. We use the node as our starting point, and then we do a little bit of extra work in here. We want to take out the URI, so we'll destructure the URI from the node parameter. So we destructure that. This should just now return us the URI. Now what we can do is set it up such that we return this paths object here in the same manner that we would here, to give it this kind of structure that it's looking for, right? Because it's looking for paths, params, ID1, ID2, etc., etc. So we can take this URI, and do we want to return it? Yeah. We want to return an object that is shaped like this. So params, because each one of these things has to have params and then ID and all of that type of stuff. So we return a params object. Not that, come on, shift. That contains the slug, is that what we want to call this? We want to call this slug, and then we want to split this out. So slug URI dot split. I think that we need to pass this an iterator as well. No. We split it at the slash. And then we filter it by an iterator and then return that iterator. So I think that what this is going to do is this essentially destructures our object and takes the pieces of our string surrounded by the slashes and sets them up as values in an array. So from there, all that we should need to do is return paths. Okay, so we're not getting yelled at about anything, which is great. If we look at our headers, we're getting a 200. Okay, let's drop this slug back in here and see what it is giving us in the console within our application. We get Twitch test in an array as the only item in that array. If we go to Twitch test / DOMS page, we get Twitch test DOMS page in brackets the way that it's expecting. So now what we should be able to do is if we do slug and then get the last item in the array, which will be slug.length -1, it gives us DOMS page here, and please just give me Twitch test here. It does. Okay, sweet. So now, presumably, we should be able to just, what's up, babe? Okay, goodbye. We should just be able to send that down as our query. And I'm just going to bet on this working and uncomment everything. Twitch test is giving us the content that we expected. We have that cover page or that cover element and all of that type of stuff. It's got the page title here. Now if we go to DOMS page, damn. Oh, I thought we were there. I thought we had it. We're still querying by the slug, which right now, if we go back to our single page query, ID with ID type of URI, and we do DOMS page. Return the title. Why is that not coming through now? Does it have to be Twitch test / DOMS page? Okay. The whole purpose of this was because we were trying to type for your input, database ID. I thought the whole purpose of this was because we couldn't. I've lost sight. Uh-oh. We split this whole thing in order to generate. So we've got a couple of like conflicting ideologies here, it looks like, right? Like we've got next telling us to split this out into an array so that we can statically generate the paths. And then we need to use the paths outside of that array to actually query our data. So let's see if we can try something like this, where in addition to slug, we pass down the path. Console.log path. Just take a look in the console. Error serializing path. Return from get static props. Why would that be? Just take a look at the params again. Make sure I'm not missing anything. So I don't know. I don't know how this got mixed up. Because we were able to query this page before just by the slug here, I thought. Man, it really must be the end of the week if I'm like out here completely backwards on what I thought was happening. This helps generates the URLs. Our get static props should give us our params. So let's send down all of the params. Let's remove all the data for now. And just console.log the params and see what we're getting here. So it's just passing us the slug. That's because we need to, when we use get static props, take a look. All that they're giving us here is params as well. So these params, params are just the slug and nothing else. So then do we need to take when we pass this down as props here, we need to rebuild the slug essentially. So const slug is going to equal, we have to join it. We take the array of params.slug.join and we join it with a slash, and that should define the slug for us. So let's pass this down as props. And then instead of params, we'll just console log out the slug. Refresh here. Twitch test /DOMS page. Now, is this enough for us to query here? I believe it should be. Yeah, we do not need the trailing slash. And because we are dropping it into this use SWR API endpoint, not going to do anything else with that. So drum roll, please. Okay, we should now be able to just pass a very simple, very basic query out to our API as the slug. Error. take a look at the, let me refresh that again and take a look at the request. This one's saying loading. What? Let's let's try this real quick, just out of curiosity. When we go to /API/page/Twitch test DOMs page, do we get anything, or is this broken? Cannot read property title of null. What are you talking about? I've gone into the page. I've made a request here. Do we need to do a catch-all route here? Coming full circle. We get an internal server error. We get an internal server error. Why would that be? Just internal server error. Let's take a look at the documentation here real quick. API, dynamic API routes, catch all routes. API routes can be extended to catch all paths by adding 3 dots inside the brackets. That matches API/post A, but also post A/B, A/B, so on. Now you can use names other than slugs, such as param. Matched parameters will be sent as a query parameter to the page and will always be an array. So the path API post A will have the following query object slug AB. So similarly, let's take a look in here at what the slug is giving us, and I presume it's giving us now an array that it's not able to use here, which is fine. We can then do essentially the same thing that we did. This is seeming redundant now, and I don't like it. Seemingly what we can do is come into here, join this array, we'll just call this URI for now. And use that as our variable. So now we got /page/Twitch test and DOMs page. So the API calls are now working. They are dynamic. And presumably, they are working on the front end. It's been quite a journey here this morning to get us to this very seemingly simple point. I almost wonder if I made this more annoying and difficult for myself than it needed to be. But now we have dynamically routed pages by way of these API calls. I do think I'm gonna stick by this. I do think that what we're doing here in the API is still the right route. It may seem a little bit weird and redundant right now, but once we actually start getting into like user locked, like gated content areas and stuff like that, then I think that things should make a little bit more sense. Yeah, I'm gonna stick to that feeling. And we'll go from there. Adjusting how this slug is treated to be able to pass it down to the WordPress API as a variable for GraphQL makes sense, and I don't think I'm too upset with having to just do this one array join and then call it a day. So yeah, I'm fine with this. This still feels okay. We have hierarchical pages working. I should now be able to very easily go in here and add another sub page to Twitch test called, we'll just call this sub page. Sub page. Let's add a gallery of one image. Here's a caption. Insert that gallery. Make this page a subpage of. We'll make it go even further. We'll go a third level and see how robust our little API is. Sub page. Loads the data, has a caption and an image. I think we're in good shape. I think this will work. My concern still lies with how these pages are generated. So when we actually go to deploy this to something like Versal or something like that, or put this up in a production environment anywhere, I'm kind of curious about how this static path generation is going to work based on the fact that this runs at build time. Yeah, we're gonna have to deploy this up somewhere just to test it out, see how it works, because I'm not 100% convinced that this is going to keep updated. And I could be wrong. I'm not sure. We'll figure that out. But for now, this feels nice. This is working the way that we want it to. Now, let's be masochists a little bit here and now do the same thing with posts. So I am going to copy our page API endpoint and use post. Since posts are not hierarchical in WordPress, at least default posts, we do not need a catch-all route. All that we need is just a single route here. Just a dynamic route. I think that we should be able to revert this back to just using the slug, because I think on a non-catch-all dynamic route, the slug that's returned is just a string and not an array. So now, instead of querying single posts, did I name these posts in here? I did. Oh my god, I can't get away from that. These need to be page. Query single page. These are actually posts. Single post actually needs to be page. Okay, we had this set up for posts to begin with. Oh goodness. Okay, we can do essentially the same thing here. We just need to get a post and a post ID. I believe that the way that this is structured is almost identical, so we can get the title. When we actually want to get a single one, what else do we need to do here? Hold on one second. Oh, also, the music went away again. Hold. It did this to us last time too. Wonder why after a certain period of time, like, goes away. Strange. There we go. Good, good, good. Okay, good. So we have a post endpoint. We should be able to do like hello world, I think, is the post ID. The ID type here is going to be the slug as well, I believe. Incorrect. Posts. Are you a liar? Just hello-world is the slug. GraphQL IDE post. Hello word. Excellent. Hello world. We are going to do this exact same thing. We can use the URI. It ends up being exactly the same thing. We'll just add slug. Since that's available to us and it matches with the name and everything that we're going with, we do not have the ability to do that with a page. I don't think. No. So for our posts, we will query by slug. Get the title and the content. Very straightforward. Does not need to be a catch-all route because there are no subpages in posts. And then what we can do is on the home page, for example, we can essentially just make a query to that post page. We can make a query to a single post, but right now what we need to do is make a query that gets all posts. So like on the home page, for example, let's say we want to add a blog feed, right? It's taken me a minute to like get my thoughts in order. I am like struggling today. I apologize. What we want to do is make a route in our API where we can query all posts, or say, let's get the first 5 posts, right? We'll make a query, limit it to 5, and then put this on the home page. So our post API endpoint, let's name it something like recent posts. Post recent.js. We will use essentially the exact same structure, so I'm just going to copy and paste this all over. Instead of querying a single post, we're going to call this recent posts. Query recent posts. We do not need to get any data from the request or the response. We do not need to pass any parameters to this call. We're just going to get all posts, edges, node, title, and I think we can get the excerpt. Yeah, let's do title and excerpt. So instead of getting the full content of this, we'll just get the excerpt so that we can show just a little blurb. Just do the traditional WordPress thing where you have your posts on the home page. It's essentially just acting as a feed to get users in there. What we will also want, however, is the slug, so that we can then use that slug to direct people to the actual single post page, right? So we will do slug, title, excerpt, and then I'm sure that we'll need something else in there at some point, but we'll just address that when we get to it. Same thing, query recent posts. We do not need any variables. We await the data, and then we return that data as the response. So if I duplicate this and I go to, yes, one other thing that I did want to make sure that I did was similar to what they did in the example in the next repository. is the WordPress one. Hello. There you are at the bottom of the page. I always forget the syntax for limiting first 20. And actually, we will add all of these because this is exactly the query that we want. We're just going to reduce the number of posts that we're getting. So we are filtering through GraphQL this query and saying, give us only the first 5 posts ordered by date descending. So the first, the most recent post first, oldest post last. This is exactly what we want. We save that and then hit this API endpoint. We go to API/post/recent. We get exactly what I expected because I told it that we were expecting arguments and we are not expecting arguments. So as you can see here, we now get our hello world post. It is the only post in the back end. Let's generate a couple more just so that we have 5. I can't just duplicate these. It's fine. We will extrapolate out from hello world to hello solar system. I will add some lorem ipsum. I will add a featured image. And I will publish. There's post number 2. Let's go back. Add another post. Hello, Galaxy. Add that same featured image just so that there's something there. Publish you. Add, not another block. We got world, solar system, galaxy. What is outside of a galaxy other than the universe? Isn't it like hello local cluster? There's some astronomy for you. Yeah. Featured image. Publish. And then one last one. Hello local cluster. Hello universe. Go back to the post, at the featured image. Looking good. Okay, publish. If we refresh this endpoint now, we should see 5 posts. This is a garbled mess because I don't have a plugin installed to format the JSON for us here, but this looks like 5 to me, so that's good. We have Hello Universe in there. That's the most recent one. Awesome. Now, we have an API endpoint to get the 5 most recent posts. I just had the thought in my head of whether or not we could leverage this API endpoint to like allow us to pass it a parameter saying like, hey, give us 5, or we will tell you how many posts we want. We probably could do that. But with all the problems that we've had this morning, just getting basic things to work, let's just keep it basic. And be fine with that. So we've got our index page where we should now be able to use SWR to do some more stuff. So we're already using SWR to fetch the home page data. And we're destructuring that data here. So we can't use the data keyword, or rather variable name, again, because we're destructuring it and using it here. So I'm curious how we'll do that. Come on, Bubba. I hear you meowing out there. You can come in. Thank you. So how do we fetch data from multiple sources? Use SWR, multiple data. It's a really solid, calls it the same key and the same component. What's he asking here? Yield the same data. I'm not sure if this is what we want. How to fetch multiple data with use effect. No. Let's think this through a little bit. So we have two API endpoints that we want to get data from. We want to query the sample page. We want to query a single page and just get the content and everything from that single page, but we also want to make a query out to the recent posts. We cannot just copy and paste this because the data and error stuff that comes back from it will conflict with the variable names that already exist here. Can we name these things by doing something like home? No, we cannot. Let's see what gets returned from these variables. We do home error and not home.data. Should then be able to get home.data.page and then home.data.page.content. Let's see if this breaks. It does not. Okay, so we can name these and then just access the data for the different parts however we would like. So because we're not passing any variables or doing anything crazy here, we can just make a simple API call to API/post/recent. And then from there, we should be able to more or less just do like a map over the response. Not a map because it is an object. Post edges. No, it's not. Edges is a array. So what we can do here, let me turn off my Slack notifications real quick because that little Slack notification is going to drive me bonkers. Pause for 1 hour. Nice. Now what we should be able to do is recent.data. This is going to be gross. Recent.data.post.edges.map node and then from here we are going to return a component that yes, thank you for that. You can go away. God, this gigantic box is just in the way of everything. We're going to return a div, and within that div we are going to have an h3 that is node.title, which needs to be in curly brackets, node.title. And then in here we're going to drop in the excerpt. It contains HTML for us already, so we are going to dangerously set some inner HTML for now. Div. We will copy this sucker. Use the same code there. Dangerously set inner HTML. That HTML is equal to the node.excerpt. In theory now, this should map over all of the edges and output 5 little cards here that have the title and the excerpt. Fingers crossed, let's see what happens. Cannot read property posts of undefined. Recent. API post recent. API post recent. Using the fetcher. Const recent. Okay, let's comment this out for now. And let's console log recent. See what you give us there, please. Console. Errors. Cannot read property posts of undefined. /API /post /recent. /API /post /recent. Okay, I'm not asking for posts anywhere. What is the... I probably need to refresh here, don't I? Yeah, data's an object. Posts, edges. So you've got recent .data .posts, right? Do we need to conditionally chain that and essentially wait for it to get some data for us? It would appear so. Yeah, let's uncomment that. Can we await this? No, because we're not within an async function. I always forget that for some reason. Okay. So we will conditionally chain this and say, if there is data, then render it. We're getting a warning about keys, which is fine. We will add a key equals node.slug. To appease the React gods, we will add a key on our div. We now have all of our posts output as this nice little fancy component, which is excellent. Something that should have been relatively easy ended up being relatively easy. What a day. Cool, that feels good. Now what we want to do is wrap this in an anchor tag or a link so that we can actually navigate to these posts. Let's do this in, we'll do this in a little bit of an annoying way for now. Obviously we can change this. It's not super ideal. I would prefer to wrap this entire card in a link or something like that to make the whole thing clickable. These are hardly cards right now, but we'll pretend that they are. So we're going to add a link, which is a Next.js thing for routing. If we go to here and look up links, you can see that we need to import link, which is a component from next/link. And this will give us access to, the nice thing about Next is that they have baked in quite a bit of functionality into their routing and stuff like that. So they have like, what's it called? Like prefetching and stuff. So when a user hovers over one of these links, it starts to fetch data so that the load times between internal links on a Next application are lightning fast. So the way that this works, you can see here based on their documentation, you pass an href prop essentially to the link component, and we will just do node.slug. And then you wrap this in a blank A tag, which hurts me as a person who's been working with HTML for such a long time. Having a blank A tag feels awful all the time, but it doesn't ever actually output that way. It's just me being picky. We will just say read more. So now if we go to the page, once it's compiled and built, oops, must have accidentally clicked on it. There's no styling at all on these links, which is okay. We're just doing this for functionality's sake right now. You can see that we have localhost 3000 / hello local cluster, which obviously is not going to go anywhere because this is not a page. So this top level dynamic route that we built out is specifically used for pages. What we want to do is create a subdirectory essentially in our pages folder called posts. And then in here, we can do almost exactly the same thing that we did with the slug, with pages, right? We'll create another file in here. It will be called slug, but we do not need a dynamic catch-all route again. We can get rid of this use router in both of these files. And then instead of posts plural, we will make this post singular because we're linking to a single post. And then we change our API call simply to just be post slug instead of page. This should go out, fetch the data based on the post slug that we pass here, and get everything that we need, presumably. We don't need we do need do we need the static paths? We do, because yeah, we're going to do this. Okay, so we're going to follow this same kind of principle for posts as well. Just keep things consistent. If this ends up changing in the future, we'll address it. But for right now, we can leverage the slug here. We need to change the query. So instead of querying all pages, we're going to be querying all posts. And we'll do posts edges node URI just to keep things consistent. Let's write out another query here just to make sure that everything looks good. Posts, nope, posts, edges, node, URI. And actually through here, we can probably do slug because we're not needing to build anything out. You know what? Just to make sure that we are, well, let's look at the example, because now we're actually on to posts and we can kind of follow along with the Next.js example of how to do this. So we don't have to do a whole bunch of adjustments since we're not using a catch-all route here. So we'll keep our data. Instead of pages, this is going to be posts. Let me change that all over the place here. All pages. Whoops. Where do we go here? All pages turns into all posts. That's all good. Query all post instead of pages. Posts. And posts. So then from here, we should be able to literally just copy and paste this from the example. We don't need to split out the URI or add it to an array because it's not a catch-all situation here. So then we can just straight up return paths, all post edges map. And then we map this to the URL structure that we want. So /posts. I want this to be singular because we're not linking to an all posts page. We're linking to the singular version of that post type. So it'll be /post/slug, which is what we want returned from here. Slug, S-L-U-G, slug. And we need to take this out of this function that we wrote here. And then from here, we can just do all post.edges.map. Presumably, in fact, I'm going to keep our little destructuring deal here because our data is structured a little bit different, I think. So that's fine. So we now have a template for posts. So what we should be able to do now is go back to our home page and adjust this URL so that it's not just node.slug. It needs to be post/node.slug. If we go to the home page here, URL at the bottom says post/hello universe. Let's click it, see what breaks. Params, oh boy, params.slug.join is not a function. /post. Get static props. That's going to be on the post template page. Params.slug.join. We do not need that. The slug is just going to be params.slug. Loading. Cannot read property title of undefined. That's okay. Let's take a look at what the response. That's because it's data.page. We want data. Well, let's look at the shape of our data before we assume. Console.log data. See what we get here. Should just be a blank page, which it is. If we look at the console. We have an object that has post title, so it should just be data.post.title along with data.post.content. Awesome. We have our posts working pretty well, it would seem. Let's go all the way down to hello world. Check that one out. We have a post with a cover. So we now have dynamic routing, but not dynamic catch-all routing for our posts as well as our pages. So our pages are dynamically generated, except for the home page, which we do ourselves for now, which is fine. We wonder if we could figure out how to do like the whole front page thing within WordPress and see where that gets us. I don't think that we have time to do that today, but that is something that we can certainly tackle in the future. But yeah, this feels pretty good to me right now. We have posts being pulled in. We have pages being pulled in. The API that we've built out feels decent still. We're kind of creating a little bit of redundancy in how the slugs and stuff are handled. However, I don't think that that's going to cause us too much issue or headache down the line. We have a really simple way to dynamically fetch our data with use SWR. I think we've set ourselves up a pretty decent kind of starting point for getting data from the WordPress API, using WP GraphQL to get that data, and then shaping our next project in such a way that we are fetching and handling our data pretty efficiently or effectively. There are certainly quite a few things that we can do around like the loading states and all of that type of stuff. That is something that we can, there are a lot of little tiny pieces in here that are going to be good for their own individual streams or videos and stuff like that. Appreciate you sticking around for that whole thing as we kind of struggled through some of the routing and kind of like figuring out how to actually get the pages to properly be queried and generated and all of that type of stuff. So I really appreciate you hanging out for the whole thing if you made it this far. We'll continue with the series further down the line. But yeah, for now, have a good day.